I knew something was off the second I saw Graham pacing like a caged dog behind his frosted glass door. He wasn't the pacing type, he was the smug, feet on the desk, delegate it down kind of boss. But there he was, sweat lining his temples like he'd just been served a summons instead of a quarterly bonus. I'd barely crossed the threshold when he spun around, flung a manila folder onto the table like it was radioactive, and snapped, "Sit." No greeting, no mention of the $52 million deal I just closed with Omnicore after half a year of delicate negotiation, red lines, and 3 near implosions. No acknowledgement that I'd salvaged a relationship they thought was dead in the water. Just a folder. And a tone that sounded like he was preparing to kick a dog, not address his lead consultant. He flipped the folder open with theatrical disgust. Inside, my expense report. A single dinner receipt, $430 at Vellum, Omnicore's procurement lead's favorite haunt. I'd taken Lane there to close the final scope terms. The shrimp alone cost more than the bottle of wine. Graham jabbed the page with his chewed-up finger. $430, he spat. You could have done it for half. Hell, a burger and 2 Cokes. I blinked. We closed a $52 million deal. And now you're closing out your time here, he said flatly, sliding a termination letter across the desk. No bonus, no severance, just a bland HR boilerplate and a note to clear your desk by noon. If you're one of the 97% who listens to stories like this without subscribing or liking, it'd mean a lot if you tap that button. It keeps these stories alive and helps the team tell more of them. Anyway, I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't even argue. I just folded the letter like I was wrapping up a parking ticket and said nothing. The silence did the work for me. Graham watched me like he expected a breakdown, maybe a plea. I gave him boredom. As I walked past the open plan desks outside his office, nobody looked up. Not a single one of them. I wasn't surprised. Most of them had watched him gut our last project manager over an iced coffee invoice, and the ones who might have cared had already left. The ones who remained either feared him, envied him, or were too broke to find something better. I didn't go straight to the elevator. I took the long way around. Through ops, through finance, through the little client wall we kept with pictures of past wins, me and half of them, Graham and all. He'd always make sure he was in the photo, even if he hadn't touched the deal. There was a picture of us at the last Omnicore conference. Me mid-sentence, hands animated. Graham smiling like he understood any of it. My desk was neat already. I didn't need a box. Just my laptop, a client binder I'd built from scratch, and the pen I'd brought from home, because theirs always ran out. As I unplugged my charger, I caught sight of the sticky note still taped to the side of my monitor. Lane's cell, scribbled in Sharpie from a lunch meeting 5 months back. I stared at it for a beat. Then I took the note, folded it into my pocket next to the termination letter, and walked out of Kincross for the last time. The sun outside hit my face like a slap. Winter light, sharp and joyless. I stood there on the curb, laptop bag in one hand, jobless but not lost. I hadn't planned an exit, but I wasn't blindsided either. You can only ignore the signs for so long. Graham had been twitchy for weeks, griping about overhead, whispering with the CFO behind glass. I just didn't think he'd go full scorched earth over a meal that closed 8 figures in revenue. I pulled out my phone. Not to call Lane, not yet. Just to look at that last email he sent the night before. Subject line, "Thanks for sticking through it." I hadn't replied yet. Didn't need to. Let the silence work a little longer. 6 months earlier, Lane wouldn't even return my calls. Omnicore had been burned, twice, by Kincross promises that bloated into delays, scope changes, and invoices so padded you could use them as crash mats. They'd pulled back from all major vendor work, and the phrase, "Lane's done," was basically gospel in our internal chatter. But I didn't believe that. Not because I was naive, but because I remembered how he looked at the end of our last Q&A call the year prior. Tired, not finished. You can't teach people how to care about delivery, but you can show them you do. So I started small. Casual check-ins, a note about a relevant supply chain shift, no pitch, an article on federal logistics funding, tailored with a post-it. Thought of your Route 9 expansion. Then, one Thursday, he replied. Just one line. Appreciate the heads up. Let's grab coffee if you're ever up near Bellevue. He knew I'd make that drive. And I did. That first coffee turned into a working lunch. The lunch turned into monthly dinners. Not pitch meetings, real conversations. He didn't want another sell job. He wanted a grown adult who could actually scope a damn project and deliver it without blowing through 3 vendors and an executive prayer circle. We didn't talk about pricing models until month 4. Even then, it wasn't formal. Just him running his finger along the table's edge and muttering, "If we ever looked at Kincross again, I'd only work with you. I don't trust the others." I remember freezing for a second, not out of shock, but because I knew right then that the door wasn't just cracked open. It was wide, and no one else at my firm even realized the hallway existed. That final dinner, the one Graham lost his mind over, wasn't a fancy night out. It was the confirmation, the quiet, "We're in." Lane looked across the table, glass in hand, and said, "We'll move the full contract over next quarter, but you stay on. No handoffs, no substitutions. You built this." It wasn't flattery. It was a demand wrapped in loyalty. I nodded, kept it low-key. Paid the check without blinking. He didn't even glance at the receipt. Because here's the thing about people like Lane. Once you've earned their trust, they don't nickel and dime you over shrimp cocktail and a second bottle of wine. They're betting on continuity, clarity, and delivery. 3 things I had provided, alone. I'd written every clause in that proposal from scratch, not a recycled SOW from finance. Every line tailored, every milestone realistically staged, not the Q3 vaporware fantasy Graham liked to push when buttering up board members. I scoped out deliverables in phases that wouldn't break Omnicore's backend or demand overtime from my own engineers. And when internal risk flagged Lane's tolerance on integration, guess who wrote the resolution matrix? Me. Kincross didn't land Omnicore. I did, and now I was gone. No handover, no forward contact. Lane would have heard by now I was listed as project lead on all shared files. My Slack account probably bounced. The email was likely deactivated before I even left the parking lot. The silence on Omnicore's end must have been deafening, because Lane wasn't just a name on a spreadsheet. He was a man who remembered bad blood, a man who watched vendor teams rotate like it was musical chairs. Each one promising the moon, none of them delivering a light bulb. He'd trusted me, and now I was airbrushed out of the picture like I'd never existed. Except they'd made one mistake. They forgot I wasn't just a vendor. I was the bridge. I was the one who kept the deal warm, who carried the relationship over months of bad history, who made it easy to say yes again. And I still had Lane's number. I hadn't texted yet. Wasn't sure what I'd even say. The deal was signed, the ink still fresh when Graham shoved that letter in my face. Kincross thought they could just slot in another PM and pray Lane wouldn't notice. He'd notice. And when he did, the question wouldn't be why did she leave? It'd be why didn't they stop her? That's the part Graham never understood. Trust isn't a line item. It's the contract behind the contract, and they just tore it up over $430. I didn't scream. I didn't lawyer up. I didn't even call a friend. There's a strange kind of power in not reacting the way people expect. Graham was probably waiting for some messy HR drama, some begging, maybe a few crocodile tears for effect, something he could use to justify what he did, something that fit the narrative he already had in his head about me being too emotionally attached to clients. But I gave him nothing. And when you give a man like that silence, it eats him alive. Let him stew. Instead, I went home and did what I always do when the ground shifts. I wrote things down. Lane's name went on the top of a fresh yellow legal pad. Under it, every deliverable I'd scoped. Phase 1 through 3, integration timelines, security benchmarks, training sequences, the works. Then I started outlining gaps, everything Kincross wouldn't be able to recreate without me, every clause I'd written in my own shorthand, every workaround Lane and I had hashed out over 2-hour dinners and impromptu Saturday calls. I knew where the pressure points were buried. Kincross didn't even know which systems Omnicore still had on legacy hardware. Then I took out my phone and typed one sentence. No longer with Kincross, happy to connect when timing's right. I didn't add context, no pitch, no explanations, just the truth and a polite open door. 3 minutes later, what happened? I read it, locked my phone, and set it face down on the table. Let him sit with that. By 10:42 that night, I had a new LLC filed. My name, my domain, my rules. Clean, professional, no fluff. I wasn't building a brand, I was building a replacement. I pulled up the Kincross SOW template, not to copy it, but to gut it. I rewrote every line into plain English. I swapped out their smokescreen language for honest scope breakdowns, no outcome-driven synergies or multi-layered integration frameworks. Just, here's what I'll deliver. Here's how long it takes. Here's the cost. Then I built 3 service packages based directly on the work I'd already done for Omnicore: entry-level implementation, mid-tier phased rollout, full-stack legacy to cloud overhaul. The exact scope I'd pitched as their Q2, Q4 roadmap. Only this time, it would come from me, without kin-cross margin stacking 40% on top just to underpay junior staff and call it scalability. By midnight, the bones of a real business existed. I wasn't trying to take down Kincross. I wasn't trying to prove anything to Graham. I wasn't even thinking about revenge. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a transition. I'd spent 5 years watching C-suite guys like Graham gamble with million-dollar contracts while skipping over the people actually doing the work. People like me, the connectors, the implementers, the ones who read every footnote and built trust in long hallway conversations and shared frustration over glitchy beta releases. They never understood that the client doesn't stay because your logo looks good on a pitch deck. They stay because someone answers the phone at 8:17 p.m. on a Thursday when something breaks. Someone who remembers their kid's name, their favorite platform version, and why they refused to work with vendor number 2 after the merger. I was that someone, and now I was free. Kincross could chase the next shiny logo, but Lane didn't care about the glitz. He wanted results, predictability, delivery, and I was about to offer him all 3, with no middlemen, no bureaucracy, and no Graham. I didn't need a war. I just needed the silence to stretch long enough for the gap to show. And when it did, I'd already be standing in it. 3 days after my exit, Kincross moved fast, faster than they should have. They submitted the first implementation packet to Omnicore like nothing had changed, like you could gut the architect of a deal and still expect the walls to hold. Their project tracker showed Phase 1 green as if the engine wasn't already missing its transmission. Omnicore didn't reply. Not for a day. Not for 2. Then on the 3rd morning, Graham got an email. Short, professional, lethal. Subject: implementation hold. Body: we'll need to pause on delivery while we assess a change in internal strategy. Please stand by. Signed, Lane Atwell, VP Procurement, Omnicore Systems. I wasn't copied. I didn't need to be, but I still saw the ripple. People inside Kincross talked. Slack channels lit up. Graham stormed in and out of conference rooms like someone had replaced his espresso with battery acid. He tried calling Lane, repeatedly, got voicemail, tried texting. No reply. The next morning, my calendar pinged. Invite from Lane. Subject: Q2 transition planning, external lead consultant. No preamble, no small talk, just a slot, just a title. I stared at it longer than I should have. It wasn't a surprise. Not really. Lane had always been sharp. He didn't send passive-aggressive corporate poetry when he was done with someone. He just moved. Quietly, efficiently. This invite wasn't a negotiation. It was a decision. By the time I clicked accept, Graham was probably halfway through his 3rd failed email draft to the Omnicore board, trying to explain why their seamless integration partner had suddenly gone dark. And this was the part no one inside Kincross seemed to understand. Lane didn't bluff. When he said he wanted no substitutions, he meant it. When he said I was the only person he trusted to run the scope, that wasn't a compliment. It was a condition. Omnicore didn't hire vendors. They hired reliability. So when I disappeared without a trace, they didn't just lose a project manager. They lost the glue. Graham probably thought he could cover the gap with a few reassignments and a hastily prepped analyst who knew how to say deliverable alignment with a straight face. He forgot that Lane was a veteran of 3 enterprise rollouts. He'd seen fluff before, and he'd had enough of it. So Omnicore stalled. No escalation, no accusation, just a clean, clinical freeze, a corporate deep breath. And in that breath, the air around Kincross started to thin. The analysts sensed it first. Deadlines without input, project managers asking questions they should have already known. Then sales started whispering, "Is Omnicore still solid?" Someone from finance pinged ops to confirm if Phase 2 billing had been scheduled. It hadn't, because there was nothing to bill. Nothing moved. And outside that frozen orbit, I was already in motion. I drafted a slide deck. Not marketing, just clarity. Timeline, costs, deliverables. Sent it to Lane through a private channel. He replied with a thumbs up and a single word. Clean. The invite included 2 more names, legal and internal systems. I knew them. I'd worked with both during scope definition. Their presence on the call told me everything I needed. This wasn't exploratory. This was real. Omnicore was preparing to move the entire operation to my consultancy, and not one person at Kincross knew they were already being replaced. Not officially, not loudly, just quietly. The way rot spreads under paint. Silent, steady, irreversible. They kept refreshing inboxes while I was already building timelines. They kept calling Lane while I was locking in a transfer clause. They kept pretending everything was fine. Because the thing about Fallout is, it doesn't start with fire. It starts with silence. The hotel bar smelled like overripe lemons and conference lanyards. You know the type: neutral carpet, overpriced cocktails, generic jazz piped in from a speaker in the ceiling, pretending not to be dust-choked. I picked the seat facing the door out of habit. Lane walked in 10 minutes early, no coat, laptop in hand. Didn't even bother with a drink order. Just pulled out the chair across from me and sat like we were picking up a conversation from 10 minutes ago, not 10 days. He didn't waste a breath. "They fired you over a dinner bill?" I nodded once. He blinked. Not surprised. Just processing. "You wrote the whole contract," he said quietly. "The entire delivery path was yours." "I know." He didn't ask how I was doing. He knew better. He reached into his folder and slid over a single page. Draft contract. No small talk, no emotional pitch, just business. 12 months. Independent consulting. Direct replacement for Kincross's delivery stream. Higher rate than I'd ever made there. Full control over scope execution. Autonomy on personnel. Clean deliverables tied to milestones. My milestones, the ones I'd already designed. I scanned it once, twice. It read like a checklist of things I'd always wanted but never thought I'd get. I didn't say thank you. He would have hated that. It wasn't a gift. It was a pivot. "Add a kill fee clause," I said without looking up, "if Kincross tries to retaliate or interfere." He smiled without teeth. "Already in there." That's what made Lane different. He didn't just trust people. He backed them with contingencies. The clause was airtight. Termination with cause only in the event of non-delivery or ethics violations. Any pressure from Kincross, any attempt to interfere nullified the clause and triggered a payout. 5 figures. Immediate, no arbitration, clean. We talked for 20 more minutes. About logistics, onboarding windows, system access. His team had already started pulling credentials and preparing transition documentation. They hadn't informed Kincross yet. No need. Let them keep wondering why their client had gone silent. By the time we wrapped, the ice in my untouched drink had melted to water. Lane stood, offered a hand. I took it. His grip was firm, not performative, just steady. "This is the last time I'll say the name Kincross," he said. "It won't be on a single doc going forward." Understood. He left me with a printed copy of the contract and a look I'd seen only once before, after we recovered a failed Q3 implementation in 8 days flat. Respect, no fanfare, no LinkedIn back padding, just clarity. I didn't feel victorious. There wasn't some wave of glee, just a subtle shift, like someone had finally aligned a crooked picture frame I'd been staring at for years. I walked out of that hotel bar and into the parking lot with a new weight, not heavy, but solid. Mine. By the time Graham and his crew realized what was happening, the documents would be signed. The contract would be active. The timelines would have shifted, not toward Kincross, but to me. I wouldn't need to announce anything. The silence would speak loud enough. It started with a single overdue invoice. The CFO flagged it during her Monday review. Omnicore's first milestone payment hadn't cleared. At first, she assumed it was a glitch, some ACH delay or procurement misstep. But when she looked closer, something was wrong. The portal showed paused. Not pending, not rejected, just frozen. She walked down the hall, report in hand, and knocked on Graham's door. He waved her in, distracted, tapping something on his phone, probably trying to charm his way into a tech panel or secure another speaking gig on modern leadership. The irony. "Omnicore's payment hasn't cleared," she said. "We're sitting on a $52 million deal and no cash has moved, not even initial deposit." Graham brushed her off with a hand wave. "Lane's probably just dealing with internal approvals. We're fine." She didn't look convinced, but she left. That was Graham's pattern. Shrug, deflect, delay. He didn't solve, he performed. By Wednesday, the board had questions. A lot of them. The milestone was tied to their quarterly projections. Investor decks had already gone out. And the CFO, now fully unsettled, escalated it. What's happening with Omnicore? The board chair asked during a finance sync. Graham spun a tale. Just procurement delays. Happens all the time. Lane's team is slow with new rollouts. There's nothing to worry about. He even smiled when he said it. That smug, passive-aggressive smirk he wore like aftershave. But his fingers tapped restlessly under the table. A twitch he'd never controlled. They asked for documentation, confirmations, a meeting link, something. He promised follow-ups. None came. Then Friday arrived. A formal notice hit the shared inbox at 10:07 a.m. Subject: Termination of agreement, Omnicore Systems Body. Please consider this formal notice of contract withdrawal effective immediately. As discussed with internal stakeholders, we've elected to pursue a different implementation pathway due to a strategic realignment. We thank you for your time and engagement. There were no specifics, no names, just clean language and a closed door. The CFO read it 3 times, then printed it, hand-delivered it to Graham, who had just finished his 3rd espresso and was mid-joke with the head of marketing. She laid it on his desk like a tombstone. He read it, then reread it. His face dropped not in a dramatic gasp, but in slow-motion dread, like someone watching their car roll into traffic from across the street. "No," he muttered. No, this can't be right. Lane didn't say anything." He tried calling, straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. At 10:34 a.m., the stock dropped 6%. News hadn't broken yet, but something in the system knew. Algorithms sniffed momentum. Omnicore had been one of Kincross's crown jewels, a case study in recovery, a $52 million turnaround that had turned Graham into a keynote darling. And now it was ash. By noon, the board convened an emergency call. Graham was summoned. They grilled him. Why didn't we know sooner? Why weren't there flags? How does a deal that size vaporize without a trace? He blamed procurement. They're slow to move, internal politics, probably budgeting against next quarter's capex. The CFO raised a hand. That doesn't explain the withdrawal. This wasn't a delay. This was a strategic kill. Someone else asked the real question. Did something happen between Lane and your team? Graham hesitated. Too long. You could feel the room lean into the silence like it had teeth. He mumbled something about lead consultant transition and unexpected personnel shifts. But it was too late, because at that moment, someone on the call opened LinkedIn, and there I was. New banner, clean title. Founder, Verity Solutions. Underneath, Enterprise Systems Delivery, Transition Planning, Client Continuity. The pieces started to slide into place, and not one of them liked the picture they saw. Graham had fired the architect of the Omnicore deal over a dinner bill, and now she was the one Omnicore had chosen to build with. There was no memo, no PR release, no scandal to cover up, just a silent unraveling. One thread pulled, and the whole damn tapestry collapsed. The press release went live at 8:01 a.m. sharp. Nothing flashy, no corporate chest thumping, just a crisp one-pager on the wire. Verity Solutions launches with focus on enterprise systems, continuity, and delivery leadership. Founder, my name, former lead architect of the Omnicore implementation strategy, to head all transition efforts effective immediately. There were no buzzwords, no claims to be redefining anything, just facts, timeline, contact info, statement of capabilities. One paragraph outlining my role in the Omnicore recovery scope: neutral, professional, undeniable. By 8:27 a.m., it had already been picked up by 3 trade sites, and by 9:10 a.m., Omnicore posted a quiet update to their partner portal. New implementation vendor listed, Verity Solutions. Underneath, lead, my name, timeline adjusted for continuity. They didn't mention Kincross, didn't need to. Their logo was simply gone, replaced by mine. The download link for the SOW now had my LLC footer at the bottom. The support channels listed my direct email. It was surgical, silent, public. By noon, industry chatter picked up like a slow leak in a pressure valve. Nothing loud, just that background hum that floats through Slack channels and procurement groups. Anyone know what's happening at Kincross? Omnicore pulled? New vendor? Wasn't she theirs? No one had the full picture. They didn't need it, because perception doesn't wait for facts. It runs on momentum. And right now, mine was clean, forward, steady. Kincross looked erratic. Their largest contract was gone, and their delivery pipeline suddenly seemed hollow. Their outbound team started overreaching, sending cold pitches to clients they normally wouldn't touch. Someone even tried to underbid a legacy partner on a logistics contract just to get a meeting. Clients noticed. Clients always notice. A quiet cancellation here, a postponed renewal there, the kind of tremors you don't feel until the building's already starting to lean. At 4:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. Graham? Mobile. I didn't answer. A minute later, it buzzed again. Graham? Mobile. No voicemail. No text. Just 2 missed calls and a silence that told me everything. He wasn't calling to apologize. Men like him never do. He was calling because something had slipped out of his control, and he couldn't patch it with charm or spin. What he built was cracking, and I was the only one who'd ever known how to hold it together. But I wasn't holding anything for him anymore. I didn't block him. That would have been dramatic. I just let the calls sit there, untouched, like bones in the desert. Then I got back to work. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving I was right. It was about momentum. Mine. It was one of those polished, overlit hotel ballrooms where the carpet looks like a migraine and the coffee tastes like regret. The kind of space designed for glossy tech brochures, too tight name badges, and polite lies told over tiny muffins. I wasn't planning to attend the round table, but Lane insisted. Just show up, he said. I think you'll enjoy the seating arrangement. I should have known. The name cards were already out when I arrived. White linen, chrome chairs, rows of industry faces I hadn't seen since my Kincross days. People who used to nod at me on elevators but never asked where I was headed. The table near the keynote was marked Strategic Partners. My name was there, dead center. Not Verity Solutions, not consultant, just me. Plain and permanent. I sat. Lane appeared minutes later. Handshake, brief smile. No need for small talk. We were well past that. Behind him came Omnicore's CEO, a man with a handshake like a blueprint. Precise, no wasted motion. He leaned toward the mic just before the session began, eyes scanning the room. We're proud to partner with teams that understand execution over ego, he said. Then, without glancing at notes, including Verity Solutions and its founder, who has been critical to our system's continuity and implementation success this quarter. A few heads turned, some subtly, some not. Then I saw them. 2 Kincross VPs seated farther down the row, Marla, who once called me a bit too hands-on in a budget meeting, and Evan, who liked to repackage my process charts with new fonts and call them strategy. Both had Kincross integrated badges clipped proudly to their jackets. They weren't at my table. They weren't even close. I could see the twitch in Marla's eye when she realized who had prime placement next to the keynote. When the panel broke for drinks, Evan approached first, hesitant, smile a little too wide. Hey, he said, reaching out. Didn't know you'd be here. I smiled back, nodded, then turned to refill my glass. No handshake, no words, just absence. Marla didn't even try. Lane, standing by the far wall, caught the moment. He raised his glass, just slightly. A nod only I would notice. Nothing performative, nothing loud. But it landed. The message didn't need words. You were right to walk, we were right to follow. Across the room, one of the event photographers snapped a candid of our table. The CEO mid-laugh, Lane relaxed, me in frame, shoulders back, head turned slightly, the picture of presence. It would end up in the event newsletter with a caption about leadership in transition. What it actually showed was a shift in gravity. Kincross hadn't just lost a contract, they'd lost the room. It came on a Monday, the kind of Monday that's all rain and inbox noise, the kind that reminds you why coffee exists in the first place. I was reviewing a compliance packet from a new client when the email popped in. No subject line, just a PDF attachment and a brief message from a former colleague I hadn't heard from in ages. Thought you'd appreciate this. I opened the file and there he was. Graham. New logo, new tagline, same smirk. Graham L. Strategic Growth Consultant. The email thread below was a cold reach out to one of our old joint accounts. A polite plea for a meeting. He used words like trusted advisor and collaborative legacy, the kind of phrases you dust off when you're trying to reframe the past without acknowledging how it actually ended. He signed off with, would love to reconnect and support your next growth cycle. I stared at it for a second. Not out of anger, just quiet astonishment that even now he thought he could rewrite it all with some templated sincerity and a LinkedIn filter. I forwarded the screenshot to Lane, no context. No comment. His reply came back in minutes. Should have paid the dinner bill. I sat back, let that settle. Not because it was witty, but because it was true. All this, all of it, because Graham couldn't stand the idea that someone else's judgment might matter more than his. That $430 dinner, the one he claimed should have been half, wasn't about the money. It was about control, about the illusion that he was the architect, not the beneficiary. He thought slashing a dinner bill was leadership. He thought cutting me loose was cost-saving. But what he really cut was the cord that kept Omnicore tethered to Kincross. The moment he signed that termination letter, he didn't just lose me. He lost trust. He lost continuity. He lost $52 million. Funny how that math works out. He thought he was saving 200 and fang. It only cost him everything.